I need your space, Mom. It's time you figured out your next steps. Elsewhere. Juno's words hit me like a freight train. Standing in the doorway of my own home, I was confronted with a reality I had never anticipated. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, demanding I leave my home for her convenience. Juno, this is my home, I managed, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. It's just, with the baby coming, I need more space, and you have your studio, right? Can't you just find somewhere else for a bit? Juno's tone softened, but her eyes were unyielding, a mirror of her father's stubbornness. Graham, leaning against the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee in hand, finally spoke up. Eloise, maybe it's not such a bad idea. A change of scenery could do you good. We need to think about what's best for Juno right now. I looked between them, my family, sensing the divide that had grown over the years. It wasn't just about space. It was a culmination of years of bending backwards for them, of making sacrifices. My transition to freelance work wasn't just a career choice. It was a necessity to keep our lives afloat while Graham struggled with his career and to provide for Juno's ambitions. Best for Juno? My voice cracked, the weight of my sacrifices pressing down on me. And what about what's best for me? Does that not matter anymore? Eloise, we're just asking for a little compromise. For family? Graham added, his voice attempting warmth but edged with an expectation of compliance. A little compromise? I laughed, a hollow sound. That seems to be all I've ever done. Compromise my time, my career, my dreams, and now my home? Juno's gaze faltered, but her resolve did not. Mom, please. It's not forever, just until I get back on my feet after the baby is born. I stared at them, the reality of my situation sinking in. My family saw me not as a pillar, but as an obstacle, an inconvenience in their lives that could be moved aside when no longer needed. Fine, I said finally, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. I'll go, but remember, actions have consequences. I hope you're prepared for them. As I walked away, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The pain of betrayal was too sharp, too raw. My own home, a place where I had poured my heart and soul into making it a sanctuary for us, was now a battleground. Graham and Juno's conversation faded behind me as I ascended the stairs to pack a few belongings. Each step was heavy, laden with the realization that my sacrifices had been for nothing. They had taken everything from me, and now they were taking my home. But as I zipped up my suitcase, a resolve settled over me. I would leave, but this was not the end. It was a new beginning, a chance to reclaim my life, my dignity, and perhaps, in time, my family. But on my terms. I will find my way, I whispered to the empty room. And when I do, I hope they realize the true cost of their demands. With one last glance at the home I had built, I stepped out into the unknown, the door closing behind me with a finality that echoed in my heart. The silence of my new, smaller studio apartment was deafening. Gone were the familiar sounds of my old home, the laughter, the arguments, the life that I had built, brick by brick, only to be pushed out. I sat at my makeshift desk, surrounded by boxes still unpacked, the glow of my computer screen the only light in the room. The stark contrast between my past and present life couldn't be more apparent, and as I sifted through emails, trying to find solace in work, the doorbell rang, a sharp interruption to my solitude. It was Graham, his presence at my doorstep both a surprise and a harbinger of unwelcome news. Eloise, we need to talk, he said, stepping into the dim light of my apartment without waiting for an invitation. What's left to talk about, Graham? I asked, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. It's about the house and finances. Juno's needs are more than we anticipated. We're going to need more help from you. I stared at him, incredulous. More help? After everything, you're asking for more? It's for your daughter, Eloise. You wouldn't want her to suffer, would you? His words were manipulative, aiming to guilt-trip me into compliance. Graham, I've given everything, my home, my peace, my life. What more do you want from me? My voice rose, a mix of anger and disbelief coloring my tone. Just think about it. It's for Juno, he repeated, his voice cold, the fatherly concern feigned at best. As he left, his words lingered in the air, a toxic reminder of the betrayal that had become my reality. They expected more from me, always more, never considering the cost to my own well-being. The following day, I decided to visit the house, not to relent to their demands, but to confront the situation head-on. The sight of my former home, now overtaken by Juno's expanding needs, was a stark representation of my displacement. Juno greeted me with a tepid smile, her earlier boldness replaced with a veneer of guilt. "Mom, I didn't think it would come to this, but we really need the help. Juno, I've helped enough. It's time you and your father figure things out on your own. I've been pushed out of my home, asked to give up my life for you, and now you ask for more?" My voice, though firm, was not without pain. "But Mom, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do?" Her entitlement was evident, expecting me to solve problems of her own making. "That's something you should have thought about before. I'm your mother, not your fallback plan." Turning to leave, I felt a surge of resolve. No longer would I be the silent supporter, taken for granted and expected to give endlessly. As I walked away, I heard Juno's frustrated voice behind me. "You're just going to leave your daughter like this?" I didn't look back. "You left me long before this, Juno. It's time you learn what life demands." That night, as I lay in the quiet of my new reality, the idea began to form. If they expected me to give more, then I would, but not in the way they anticipated. It was time to reclaim what was mine, to show Graham and Juno the consequences of their actions. My contributions, my sacrifices, would no longer be invisible. They had awakened a determination within me, a drive to seek justice for the wrongs done. And as the plan took shape in my mind, a sense of empowerment enveloped me. They had underestimated me, but they would soon learn the true cost of their demands. My revenge would be my return, my reclamation of dignity, and it would start with taking back what was rightfully mine. My resolve had never been clearer as I embarked on my plan of retribution. The first step was uncovering the full extent of Graham's deceit. Over the years, he had masterfully crafted the narrative that he was the financial backbone of our family, a story I knew all too well to be false. But it was time the truth came to light, not just for me, but for Juno too. I began by meticulously gathering financial statements, bank records, and property deeds, evidence of my contributions, my sacrifices. It was during this search that I discovered something more insidious. Documents hidden away in a file I had never seen before revealed a shocking truth. Graham had been funneling money from our joint accounts into a private one I knew nothing about. The revelation was a cold, hard slap in the face, a betrayal that cut deeper than I could have imagined. Armed with this information, I confronted Graham, demanding answers. "Graham, what is this?" I slammed the documents on the kitchen table in front of him, the numbers and transactions a glaring testament to his betrayal. He looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and guilt. "Eloise, it's not what you think. I was saving that money for us, for our future." "Our future?" I scoffed, disbelief coloring my tone. "Or your future without me. You've been lying to me, to Juno, undermining my contributions, making me out to be the lesser partner in our marriage." Graham's attempts to explain were feeble, his words empty. "Eloise, I just thought—" "You thought you'd get away with it," I interrupted, my voice firm. "You thought I'd never find out. But I did, and now everything changes." The confrontation left Graham rattled, his facade of control crumbling. But for me, it was the catalyst for my next move. If Graham could betray me in such a fundamental way, then all bets were off. I took my findings to a lawyer, explaining my situation and my desire to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The lawyer, a woman of sharp wit and even sharper legal acumen, laid out a plan that was both brilliant and ruthless. "We'll begin with the house," she said, her eyes alight with strategic fire. "It's in your name alone, correct?" "Yes," I confirmed, a sense of empowerment growing within me. "Then you have more power than you realize. We can leverage this to not only secure your financial independence, but also to send a clear message to Graham and Juno." The plan was simple yet effective. I would sell the house, the one asset solely in my name, and reclaim the financial stability Graham had tried to steal from me. But more than that, it would be my declaration of independence, a demonstration that I was no longer the woman they could manipulate and betray without consequence. As I initiated the process, my interactions with Graham and Juno became strained, their demands and manipulations more desperate. Yet, with each attempt to sway me, my resolve only strengthened. "Mom, you can't do this to us," Juno pleaded one day, her voice tinged with panic. "Where will we go? What about the baby?" "You should have thought of that before," I replied. my voice devoid of the warmth it once held for her. "You both made your choices. Now I'm making mine." Graham, too, tried to appeal to my sense of family, of loyalty, but his words fell on deaf ears. The man I had married, the father of my child, was a stranger to me now, his true nature revealed in the light of his actions. As the sale of the house moved forward, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For years, I had been bound by my roles as a wife and mother, my own needs and desires secondary to those of my family. But no longer. I was taking back control, forging a new path on my own terms. And as for Graham and Juno, they would soon learn the true cost of their ingratitude and betrayal. My revenge was not just about punishment. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my independence, and my life. The day I left for the last time, the air was thick with an unspoken tension. Graham and Juno stood in the living room of the house that was no longer ours, their expressions a mix of confusion and anger. They had just learned of the sale, a transaction done quietly, without their knowledge. "You sold the house?" Graham's voice was low, disbelief etched into every word. "Our home, Eloise? How could you?" "It's in my name, Graham. My home. And I decided to sell it," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the emotional turmoil swirling inside me. Juno, her hands cradling her growing belly, looked from Graham to me, her eyes wide. "But where will we go? What about the baby?" "That's something you should have considered before demanding I leave my own home," I replied, the coldness in my voice surprising even me. "This is betrayal, Eloise, pure and simple," Graham said, his voice rising in anger. "Betrayal?" I laughed, a bitter sound. "You want to talk about betrayal? Look in the mirror, Graham. You lied, you manipulated, you took everything I gave and asked for more." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy between us. I turned to leave, my heart heavy, but my resolve unshaken. This was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another, one where I was in control. As I reached the door, Graham's voice stopped me. "You'll regret this, Eloise. You're tearing this family apart." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. Without turning back, I said, "No, Graham. This family was torn apart long ago. I'm just the first to acknowledge it." Leaving the house behind, I didn't look back. The finality of the moment was overwhelming, but beneath the sorrow and betrayal, there was a burgeoning sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I was free from the expectations and demands that had defined my life. In the weeks that followed, the reality of my actions set in. Graham and Juno were forced to find a new place to live, their comfortable existence upended by my decision. Rumors and whispers followed me in our small community, some sympathetic, others critical. But none of that mattered. I had taken a stand, reclaimed my agency, and in doing so, had started down a path of self-discovery and independence. My new apartment became a sanctuary, a place of peace and creativity. Work flourished as I threw myself into projects, my graphic design business thriving as never before. And in the quiet moments, I found a strength I didn't know I had, a resilience forged through years of sacrifice and hardship. The phone calls from Graham and Juno became less frequent, their attempts to guilt me into reversing the sale unsuccessful. Each call was a reminder of the chasm between us, a gap that had widened too much to ever fully bridge. One day, as I sat at my desk, the sun setting outside my window, I realized I no longer felt anger or bitterness toward Graham and Juno. Instead, there was a sense of pity for them, for their inability to see beyond their own needs and desires. I had moved on, building a life that was truly mine, free from the constraints of my old one. The sale of the house, once a source of contention and pain, was now a symbol of my liberation, a decisive step toward a future filled with possibility. And as I looked forward to what lay ahead, I knew that the best revenge wasn't the pain I had inflicted on Graham and Juno, but the life I was building for myself, one where I was no longer a victim of their selfishness and deceit. It was a life where I was finally, truly free. The completion of the house sale marked not just the end of an era, but the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one where I stood firmly on my own 2 feet, unburdened by the expectations and manipulations of those I had once called family. My new apartment, once a symbol of my forced exile, had become a haven of peace and creativity. The walls, adorned with my own designs, reflected a life that was entirely mine. My freelance work, now more than just a job, was a testament to my resilience, a thriving business built from the ashes of my former life. It was during this time of renewal that I received a call from Graham, his voice a mix of desperation and anger. "Eloise, you've taken everything from us. How could you do this to your own family?" "Family?" I echoed, the word bitter on my tongue. "A family supports each other, Graham. What you and Juno did was far from supportive. It was selfish." "You're going to regret this, Eloise. You can't just start over and expect us to disappear. We're your family, whether you like it or not." "I've made my peace with that, Graham. It's time you make yours," I replied, my voice calm but firm. The call ended with a click, his threats hanging in the air, but they no longer had any power over me. The weeks turned into months, and my life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The drama and turmoil that had once defined my existence seemed like distant memories. But I knew that true closure had not yet been achieved. The final act of my plan was still unfolding, a silent countdown to the moment when Graham and Juno would realize the full extent of their actions. That moment came unexpectedly. I had ventured out to a local cafe, a small luxury in my new life of independence, when I spotted them. Graham and Juno were seated at a table near the window, their conversation tense and fraught with emotion. I could overhear snippets of their dialogue, words tinged with regret and desperation. "Can't believe she did this to us," Juno was saying, her voice a mix of disbelief and sorrow. "It's her revenge, Juno. She's made her point," Graham replied, his tone resigned. The sight of them, so defeated and broken, stirred something within me. Not satisfaction or triumph, but a profound sadness for what could have been. We had once been a family, bound by love and shared dreams. Now, all that remained were the shattered pieces of our once happy life. As I left the cafe unnoticed by them, I felt a chapter of my life closing. My revenge, though justified, had come at a great cost. The family I had once cherished was no more, their place in my life now occupied by memories and lessons learned. In the solitude of my apartment, I reflected on the journey I had undertaken. From the depths of betrayal and loss, I had emerged stronger, more self-assured. My revenge, while necessary, was not the source of my strength. It was the realization that I alone was the architect of my happiness, the master of my destiny. And so, as I looked towards the future, I knew that the best was yet to come, not because of the revenge I had exacted, but despite it. My life, once defined by others, was now my own, and with each passing day I would build it, piece by piece, into something beautiful and unbreakable. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities, but I faced it head-on, with a heart full of hope and a spirit unyielded. For I had learned that true strength comes not from vengeance, but from the courage to move forward, to forgive, and ultimately, to find peace within oneself. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I anticipated. A crisp morning breeze accompanied my steps as I approached the house I once called home, the real estate agent beside me. The for sale sign stood prominently in the front yard, a beacon of the impending change. Graham and Juno, unaware of my arrival, were about to face the reality of their situation head-on. As I rang the doorbell, my heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation and resolve. The door swung open, and there stood Graham, his expression shifting from surprise to disbelief as he saw me. "Eloise, what are you doing here?" he stammered, confusion written all over his face. "I'm here to show the house, Graham. It's time you both faced the consequences of your actions," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the emotional turmoil within. Juno appeared behind Graham, her eyes widening in shock. "You can't be serious, Mom? You're really going through with this?" "Yes, Juno, I am. You both seemed to forget that this house was the one thing I had left. You took everything else from me," I said, the words laced with a bitterness I no longer bothered to hide. The real estate agent, a neutral party in the midst of our familial storm, stepped forward. "If you'll allow us, we have potential buyers on the way. It would be best if we could proceed without any complications." Graham and Juno exchanged a look of desperation, the reality of their situation finally dawning on them. "Eloise, please, there has to be another way. We'll be left with nothing," Graham pleaded, his voice breaking. "You left me with nothing when you demanded I leave my own home," I countered, my resolve hardening. "I warned you, actions have consequences. It's time you learned that lesson." As the potential buyers arrived, Graham and Juno retreated into the house, their whispers a cacophony of regret and disbelief. The real estate agent and I led the buyers through the property, each room a reminder of the life I once lived, the memories I once cherished. After the showing, as I stood in the living room for what could be the last time, Juno approached me, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I never wanted it to come to this." Her apology, though heartfelt, came too late. "Juno, I hope one day you understand why I had to do this. Maybe then you'll forgive me as I'm trying to forgive you." Leaving the house behind, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The sale was more than just a transaction. It was a symbol of my liberation from the chains of betrayal and manipulation. Graham and Juno's future was now in their own hands, just as mine was in mine. The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and finalizations. The house sold quickly, the market eager to claim such a prized property. And with the final signature, I closed the chapter on a significant part of my life. As I sat at my apartment, the deed to the house now transferred, I realized the depth of what I had accomplished. I had stood up for myself, faced my betrayers, and emerged victorious. But it was a victory tinged with sadness, for in gaining my independence, I had lost my family. Yet as I looked toward the future, I knew that this was only the beginning. My journey of self-discovery and empowerment was far from over. I had found strength in my solitude, resilience in my resolve, and a sense of peace in my decisions. Graham and Juno's path would be their own to forge, just as mine was now solely in my hands. The road ahead was uncertain, but I faced it with a newfound confidence, ready for whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. The aftermath of the house sale was like a storm that had passed, leaving behind a trail of devastation and a new, uncertain path forward. Graham and Juno, now without a home, were forced to confront the reality of their situation. The comfortable life they had known at my expense was gone. I heard about their struggles through the grapevine, the small town's network buzzing with gossip. They had moved into a small, cramped apartment, a far cry from the spacious comfort of the home I had sold. It was in this setting that I decided to confront them one last time, to see for myself the consequences of my actions. Knocking on their door, I braced myself for the encounter. Juno answered, her appearance a stark contrast to the vibrant, confident woman she once was. Her eyes, once full of life, now held a weariness that spoke volumes. "Mom," she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and resignation. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see how you're doing," I replied, stepping into the dimly lit apartment. The space was cramped, cluttered with boxes and makeshift furniture, a far cry from the comfort of our former home. Graham appeared from the other room, his expression hardening at the sight of me. "Come to gloat, Eloise? To see the results of your revenge?" "No, Graham, I came to see if there's anything left of the family we once were," I said, my voice steady. The conversation that followed was tense, filled with accusations and recriminations. Juno and Graham blamed me for their current situation, unable to see their own roles in the downfall of our family. "You took everything from us, Mom. How could you?" Juno's voice cracked with emotion, her earlier bravado gone. "I did what I had to do, Juno. You and Graham made your choices, and I made mine," I replied, the pain of our broken relationship evident in my words. Graham, ever the antagonist, sneered, "You think you've won, Eloise, by selling the house and leaving us like this?" "This wasn't about winning, Graham. It was about respect, about recognizing my contributions and sacrifices, something you never did," I said, my resolve firm. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that the chasm between us was too wide to bridge. The pain and betrayal had left deep scars, too deep for easy forgiveness or reconciliation. Leaving their apartment, I felt a mix of emotions. There was sadness for the family we could have been, anger at the years of manipulation and disrespect, and surprisingly a flicker of hope. Hope that maybe this ordeal would be a wake-up call for Juno and Graham, a chance for them to reflect on their actions and perhaps find a way to change. The walk back to my apartment was a reflective one. I had sought revenge, and I had achieved it. But at what cost? The satisfaction of seeing Graham and Juno confront the consequences of their actions was overshadowed by the realization that our family was forever altered. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life, my work, and my sense of self. The drama and revenge that had consumed me were now in the past, a chapter closed. I had emerged stronger, more independent, but the journey had left its mark. The lesson was a hard one, learned through pain and loss. True strength comes not from vengeance, but from the ability to move forward, to forgive oneself, and to find peace in the aftermath of turmoil. And so, as I continued to build my new life, I held on to that lesson. The future was uncertain, but I faced it with a heart open to new beginnings, and a spirit healed from the wounds of the past. The road ahead was mine to shape, and I stepped forward with determination and hope, ready for whatever lay ahead. Years had passed since the house sale, years in which the silence between us had grown into a chasm seemingly insurmountable. I had moved on, my life now filled with new challenges and achievements, my past with Graham and Juno a distant, if painful, memory. It was a crisp autumn morning when I received a letter, its handwriting unfamiliar. The return address bore Juno's name, a name that stirred a myriad of emotions within me. With a deep breath, I opened the envelope, bracing myself for what might be inside. "Dear Mom," the letter began, each word heavy with an emotion that seemed to reach out from the page. "It's taken me years to find the courage to write this. I know I've caused you unimaginable pain, and for that, I am deeply sorry. My actions were unforgivable, driven by selfishness and a failure to see beyond my own needs." I sat down, the letter trembling in my hands. Juno's words, so raw and honest, were a far cry from the daughter I remembered. "I've spent a lot of time reflecting on my life, on the choices I made, and the people I hurt. It's been a difficult journey, one filled with regret and a deep desire for redemption. I understand if you can't forgive me, but I needed you to know that I am truly sorry for everything." The letter continued, detailing Juno's life since we last spoke. She talked about the challenges of raising her child alone, of the hardships and the lessons learned along the way. It was a story of growth and change, of a young woman who had faced the consequences of her actions and emerged stronger for it. I'm reaching out not just to apologize, but to ask for a chance to start anew, to rebuild what we once had, in whatever form that might take. I miss you, Mom. I miss our family, despite everything that's happened. Finishing the letter, I found myself at a loss. The emotions that coursed through me were a tangled web of sorrow, anger, and, surprisingly, hope. Juno's words had opened old wounds, but they also offered the possibility of healing, of reconciliation. The decision to respond weighed heavily on me. Could I forgive her? Could we ever rebuild what had been so thoroughly destroyed? The answer was unclear, the path forward fraught with uncertainty. Days passed as I pondered Juno's letter, her words echoing in my mind. It was a conversation with an old friend that finally gave me clarity. "Forgiveness isn't just for those who wrong us," she said. "It's for us, too. A way to let go of the past and move forward." And so I wrote back to Juno. My letter was cautious but open, expressing my own pain and the long journey I had taken towards healing. I spoke of the possibility of starting anew, not as the family we once were, but as something different, something new. "Let's take it one step at a time," I wrote. "Building bridges takes effort from both sides, and I'm willing to try if you are." Sending the letter was like releasing a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Whether Juno and I could truly reconcile remained to be seen, but the door was open, a crack of light in the long darkness that had separated us. The days turned into weeks, and eventually Juno replied. Her response was filled with gratitude and hope, a mirror of my own cautious optimism. We agreed to meet, to talk face to face after so many years apart. Sitting across from her that day, I saw not the selfish young woman who had demanded so much from me, but a mature, thoughtful individual who had faced her demons and emerged stronger. The conversation was difficult, filled with tears and apologies, but also with laughter and shared memories. It was the beginning of a new chapter for us, one marked not by the pain of the past, but by the promise of the future. Forgiveness had opened the door to a new relationship, one built on understanding, respect, and love. As I looked at Juno, now not just my daughter, but a fellow survivor of life's trials, I knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the journey we would take together, hand in hand towards a brighter future.